The holiday season is once again upon us, and if you're anything like me, you enjoy indulging in holiday-themed games around this time of the year. Now, I know it's a little bit early since it's only October, but I took the opportunity to get my hands on The Legend of Santa, so I'm here with a review for you to let you know if this one is worth playing this holiday season. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, and I've only been doing videos for about a year now, you at least know from the beginning of last year that I do enjoy my holiday-themed games. I covered the Grinch Christmas Adventures last year, and I don't know if I'll cover any other Christmas-themed games, but even if I don't, The Legend of Santa is going to fill that void this year around. Looking at this, you're probably thinking, well, this looks like Super Mario Bros. 3. And that's a good observation, because that's more or less what it is. And I don't mean that as an insult, because this is pretty fun. And there's nothing wrong with taking inspiration from retro greats. If you enjoyed the NES era of Mario platformers, and even the Super Nintendo era, because it does borrow some elements from those as well. And in The Legend of Santa, you're going to take on the role of jolly old Saint Nick. Now, it's divided up into 3 separate chapters that have a series of levels which all culminate in a boss fight, and I'm not going to go into the story because I'm not going to spoil it. It's not very long. You have a little bit of story at the start of a chapter, and then you'll have a little bit of story at the end. Chapters 1 and 2 will be very similar visually because they are that Christmas theme, a lot of ice and snow. There's a pretty cool level where instead of lava, it's hot chocolate, which I thought was really neat. And then the 3rd chapter, which was probably my favorite, and I believe is a brand new chapter that was just added recently, is more of a Halloween themed chapter. And that was a bit of a breath of fresh air after playing through the first 2, since they did look so similar and play so similar. In The Legend of Santa, your main goal is simple. Just go from the left side of the screen to the right, or in some cases from the right to the left, and reach your goal. The only time where this isn't the case is those boss fights at the end of each chapter. There's 2 main power-ups that you can acquire in this, and they're pretty similar in nature. One has you throwing out candy canes in an arc pattern, and the other has you throwing little balls of coal, which is pretty much verbatim the Fire Flower from the Mario series. In place of the coins to collect for 1-ups are cookies, and in place of 1-up mushrooms are little Santa hats. It plays similarly in that you can take 2 hits before losing a life, but there are some cases where it is a little bit different from Mario. The aesthetic of this game is really nice to look at. It has a nice 8-bit art style, and it has a whole bunch of different resolutions in in-game visual options that you can toggle on. They do make it a bit harder if you choose to go with the 4:3 aspect ratio over the default widescreen, because all it really does is chops off the side of the screen, and it gives you less area to look at. Of course, that's optional, and I opted to play with the widescreen because trying the 4:3 aspect ratio, I didn't like the idea of it just chopping the sides off. But I also think this is why the boss fights are in such a small area of the screen and just the middle, because if they took up the entire screen, then that would make it so that the boss could go off the screen and it would have to scroll. So initially when I played, I was like, this is kind of weird that the boss fights take place in only the middle part of the screen. But then once I tried out the 4:3 aspect ratio, it all made sense. Each of the levels has a mid-checkpoint, which is denoted by like a candy cane Christmas pole that'll light up when you run past it. And for the most part, these are well placed. I think the only exception is the boss levels, because they're still in the middle of the level, and if you get to the boss of an area and then you lose a life, you have to replay a large chunk of the level to try again. So I kind of wish that there was an additional checkpoint on those final levels of each chapter that was right before the boss. I understand that they typically give you a 1-up right at the boss door, so you don't really run the risk of getting a game over, but even with that, I would have preferred to have an additional checkpoint instead of a 1-up right before the boss fights. The Legend of Santa tells a pretty charming story about jolly old Saint Nick, and that's complemented nicely by a pretty good soundtrack. This is a really short experience, but it's also a very enjoyable one. You can even play this between 1 to 4 players co-op, which I unfortunately didn't get to try. I don't have anybody to play with, but I did enjoy this on my own, and can say that I highly recommend this if you like Christmas-themed games as much as I do. I think The Legend of Santa might just be one for me to come back in the future when I have that Christmas itch. It currently contains only 3 chapters and is fairly short, with the main difficulty coming from the boss fights, but it is a really enjoyable one, and for the cheap price of $5, this is such an easy recommendation from me. It doesn't save at all, so just be aware of that, but it really doesn't need a save option because it's only a handful of levels before you do fight the boss, and the chapters are all unlocked from the start. So you can technically play chapter 1 and then come back later and play chapter 2. The Legend of Santa is pretty straightforward. It does have one branching path per chapter. If you prefer to go one way or the other, you could always go back and play both levels if you want for completion's sake. The only really optional thing to do in this is there's some really well hidden secret exit shortcuts. And when I say these are really well hidden, they're really well hidden. So keep your eyes peeled for opportunities to find one of these. But they don't lead you to any bonus levels or anything like that. So if you miss them, it's not really that big of a deal. For fans of Christmas-themed games, or just Mario-style NES platformers in general, I highly recommend The Legend of Santa. It's a brief experience, but it's really enjoyable. And who knows, maybe if this does well enough, we might even get some additional chapters to the package. I appreciate you watching this review, and hope you found it helpful. If you did, give the video a like, comment below if you have any questions, if there's anything you're curious about, maybe I missed something, let me know, and I'll get back to you. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, and until next time, have a good one.